Hey, thanks so much for clicking on the video. My name is Kaylee, and this is Read Rant Review, where, you guessed it, I read books and I do rant reviews. I read a bunch of crazy, crazy books, and then I give you a beat by beat, chapter by chapter breakdown of said books. This month, October 2025, I am doing a whole bunch of thrillers. We are deep diving all sorts of really, really popular thrillers through the years and seeing if we like them. For the most part, I have covered a couple Frida McFadden books, and I'll cover a couple more because her books are just like the thing, right? I compared her to Colleen Hoover. I said she was the Colleen Hoover author of the thriller genre, and I stand by that very, very firmly. But today we are branching out a little bit, and we are talking about another really popular one that I read 2 years ago now, and revisiting it, I hated it. This was the most pretentious thing I've ever read in my entire life, but we'll unpack it when we get there, okay? The book we're talking about is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaledes, I believe is how you say his last name. So The Silent Patient, published in 2019, like 330-ish pages, nothing too wild. Currently on Goodreads, it's sitting at a 4.17 with over 3 million ratings. I'm going to go ahead and read you the book description. I'm going to give you a couple disclaimers, and then we'll dive right in. Alicia. Now, it's spelled in such a way, Alicia, that it could be Alicia. And I listen to the robot voice and have the robot voice read to me because I can't listen to regular audiobooks. Don't ask, it's a processing thing. So this robot reads it to me. And it kept going back and forth between saying Alicia and Alicia, and I was about to throw my phone across the room. I'm going to say Alicia because that's easier for me personally, okay? So don't get upset with me. Don't make it weird. Alicia Brennison's life is seemingly perfect. A famous painter married to an in-demand fashion photographer. She lives in a grand house with big windows overlooking a park in one of London's most desirable areas. One evening, her husband Gabriel returns home late from a fashion shoot, and Alicia shoots him 5 times in the face and then never speaks another word. Alicia's refusal to talk or give any kind of explanation turns a domestic tragedy into something far grander, a mystery that captures the public imagination and casts Alicia into notoriety. The price of her art skyrockets, and she, the silent patient, is hidden away from the tabloids and spotlight at the Grove, a secure forensic unit in North London. Theo is a criminal psychotherapist who has waited a long time for the opportunity to work with Alicia. His determination to get her to talk and unravel the mystery of why she shot her husband takes him down a twisting path into his own motivations. A search for the truth that threatened to consume him. The Silent Patient is a shocking psychological thriller of a woman's act of violence against her husband, and of a therapist obsessed with uncovering her motive. Like I said, the most pretentious writing I think I have ever read in my entire life, and I am so incredibly torn because I don't know how much of it is just the author's writing style. I've never read anything else by said author, or if this was a purposefully done thing, because this is told through the perspective of Theo, the psychoanalyst guy, and we'll get into it. You'll understand pretty quick, like, the type of person that he is, and so I'm like, I don't know if it's just, we're really deep in, like, the method acting here, you know what I mean, of, like, character, whatever, that's just how they talk. And so I convinced myself that maybe that's what it is. Like, maybe Alex is just such a good writer that he made me hate this man with my entire being. Now, I thought that, and then I got to parts where we read from, like, Alicia's diary, and it sounds the exact same, like identical. And I said, oh, I think this might just be how this person writes. So with that being said, I'm not going to be very nice to this book. I'm not going to be very nice about it. When I read it in 2023, I literally couldn't put the book down, though, and I really enjoyed it at the time, right? I thought it was a little predictable, and I was kind of, like, frustrated with it as a whole, but I enjoyed myself, right? So I'm not knocking anybody. If this is your favorite book, I love that so much for you, bestie. If you're going to be offended and make it weird, I'll see you in the next video, okay? So with that, the couple of disclaimers that I have. The first one being, my review will contain all of the spoilers. Like I said, beat by beat, chapter by chapter breakdown. The second disclaimer is just to say that my review is not for the author. It's not for friends, fans, family, stans, anything of the like. I'm not going to be very nice. I will be laughing at this and critiquing it and whatever, okay? Same thing. Don't make it weird. And the last disclaimer is a content or trigger warning that I like to put on my videos, but I am not doing it for this particular series. So go in with this with viewer discretion is advised. There you go. Okay, look it up if you feel concerned, or click off at any point if this is too much for you. No hard feelings in any way, okay? I appreciate your support regardless. Now, I think the best way for me to convey to you what I mean when I say the word pretentious is just to read you the first little bit. So this is the prologue. This is Alicia Berenson's diary, July 14th. I don't know why I'm writing this. That's not true. Maybe I do know, and I just don't want to admit it to myself. I don't even know what to call it. This thing I'm writing, it feels a little It feels a little pretentious to call it a diary. It's not like I have anything to say, and Frank kept a diary, not someone like me. Calling it a journal sounds too academic somehow, as if I should write in it every day, and I don't want to. If this becomes a chore, I'll never keep it up. Maybe I'll call it nothing, an unnamed something that I occasionally write in. I like that better. Once you name something, it stops you seeing the whole of it or why it matters. You focus on the word, which is just the tiniest part, really, the tip of the iceberg. I've never been that comfortable with words. I always think in pictures, express myself with images, so I'd never started writing this if it weren't for Gabriel. I've been feeling depressed lately about a few things. I thought I was doing a good job of hiding it, but he noticed. Of course he did. He notices everything. He asked how the painting was going. I said it wasn't, and he got me a glass of wine, and I sat at the kitchen table while he cooked. I like watching Gabriel move around the kitchen. He's a graceful cook. Elegant, balletic, like balletic, balletic. Interesting. Organized. Unlike me, I just make a mess. Talk to me, he said. There's nothing to say. I just get so stuck in my head sometimes. I feel like I'm wading through mud. Why don't you try writing things down? Keeping some kind of record? That might help. Yeah, I suppose so. I'll try it. Don't just say it, darling. Do it. I will. He kept nagging me, but I did nothing about it. And then a few days later, he presented me with a little book to write in. It has a black leather cover and thick white pages. I ran my hand across the first page, feeling its smoothness, and then sharpened my pencil and began. He was right, of course. I feel better already. Writing this down is providing some kind of release, an outlet. A space to express myself. A bit like therapy, I suppose. Gabriel didn't say it, but I could tell he's concerned about me. And if I'm going to be honest, I may as well be. The real reason I agreed to keep this diary was to reassure him, prove that I'm okay. I can't bear the thought of him worrying about me. I don't ever want to cause him any distress or make him unhappy or cause him pain. I love Gabriel so much. He's without a doubt the love of my life. I love him so totally, completely. Sometimes it threatens to overwhelm me. Sometimes I think, no, I won't write about that. This is going to be a joyful record of ideas and images that inspire me artistically, things that make a creative impact on me. I'm only going to write positive, happy, normal thoughts. No crazy thoughts allowed. Oh. Interesting. That was a lot of words to say I started a diary. So, with all of that being said, with the prologue, with whatever, we go into part 1, chapter 1. Like I said, the book is told through Theo Faber's point of view. He is a psychotherapist or psychoanalyst, whatever guy. He's a dude. He's just a dude that talks to people. And so the first chapter goes into detail about the murder and about her like doing this to her husband. So it was on August 25th. This kind of matters because there's like some dates that we'll say throughout, right? So like that journal entry was from July 14th. Month and a half later, the murder happens. He comes home late from a photo shoot, and then 30 minutes later, the neighbor calls 911. Cops go into the house. It's pitch black inside. Alicia is there, covered in blood, standing, like staring at the fireplace, not reacting to anything, just completely stoic. And then they look down, and the husband is like tied up, like his hands and feet are tied up with wire, and he had been shot 5 times in the face. We are coming out of the gate running in this book, right? The other reason that like Alicia is covered in so much blood is her wrists are cut, and they thought that this was a murder or attempted. So she gets taken to the hospital. She survives, and she does not make any statements. She does not speak another word again. We are 6 years in the future. She has yet to say a single word. The only thing that she did, like for her quote statement, was she painted like a self-portrait, and on it, it said Alcestis. What is that? What does that word mean? I know you're so curious. So luckily in chapter 2, immediately after, they tell us. So Alcestis is the heroine of the Greek myth, a love story of the saddest kind. Alcestis willingly sacrifices her life for that of her husband Admetus, dying in his place when no one else will. An unsettling myth of self-sacrifice. It was unclear how it related to Alicia's situation. The true meaning of the illusion remained unknown to me for some time, until one day the truth came to light. But I'm going too fast. I'm getting ahead of myself. I must start at the beginning and let the events speak for themselves. I mustn't color them, twist them, or tell any lies. I'll proceed step by step, slowly and cautiously, but where to begin? I should introduce myself, but perhaps not quite yet. After all, I am not the hero of this tale. It is Alicia Brennison's story, so I must begin with her and the Alcestis. So the self-portrait is Alicia in her studio painting, except she is naked and she has scars on her wrist, and the paintbrush is dripping with red paint, or possibly blood. Who knows? The art gallery owner, Jean Felix, I know, again, I'm slaughtering. It's supposed to be French. Shut up. Shut up. You're not here for professionalism, okay? So her and Jean go way back. They're friends. They were friends, I think, like in college, and had been for a really, really long time. They had painted houses together, right? Like they were BFFs, and got to the point where his art wasn't very good. So instead, he ends up opening up a studio. Her art started to take off. So it makes sense that he would show her work. And they had this like collaborative arrangement thing for quite a long time, up until, again, this event takes place. And so he puts this on display, and like her stuff was still displayed at the gallery at that time. And so then all of a sudden, there is people lined up around the block to come and see the painting from this mad woman, right? And during the trial, the judge took her silence as guilt, sure. And then there ended up being like a psychotherapist guy that goes on trial, or goes up there to like testify, and essentially says that the silence is actually like a marker of like a greater psychological issue, and that essentially they do the whole like plead crazy thing so that she can go to like a psychiatric hospital instead of prison. And so the guy who's up here talking about this, his name is Lazarus, and he ends up convincing the judge of this. And so that's the ruling that they have. They said, okay, she's a plea of diminished responsibility. And so she ends up going to the psychiatric hospital. And so the guy that was up there testifying, that was able to convince them of this, he is the clinical director at the Grove, which is where she then gets sent to, which is kind of interesting. I'm not sure how this would actually happen in real life. And I also obviously don't know the law and how these courts and whatnot happen in Europe. So who knows? So she's at the psychiatric hospital. 6 years later is where we are now. A psychotherapist position opens up at the Grove, hence Theo. And so he applies for this job. He's going through the interview process in chapter 3 and trying to land this, because all he freaking wants so bad is to just figure out why she won't speak. Like, it is so confounding to him. He's like borderline obsessed with this woman and like trying to figure out what the heck is wrong with her. It's a little creepy. I don't really like it very much, but I guess whatever makes you passionate about your work. And so then we go into chapter 3, and this is what I'm talking about this guy being like so deeply and inherently unlikable. I wanted to help start her up again, help Alicia tell her story, to heal and get well. I wanted to fix her. Without wishing to sound boastful, I felt uniquely qualified to help Alicia. I'm a forensic psychotherapist and used to working with some of the most damaged, vulnerable members of society. And something about Alicia's story resonated with me personally. I felt profound empathy with her right from the start. In chapter 3 opens, we finally get the formal introduction to this guy. My name is Theo Faber. I am 42 years old, and I became a psychotherapist because I was f***ed up. That's the truth, though it's not what I said during the interview when the question was put to me. And so instead he goes on a whole thing about like, I just want to help people. But then he tells us about why he is so messed up, and it's really just that he had like a very, very abusive father. And so he left home when he was 18 to go off to university, and He thought that he was free, right? He finally escaped this like abusive household. But the voices in his head and like hearing his dad's voice, he has never been able to truly escape from. I was wrong. I didn't know it then, but I realized too late that I had internalized my father, introjected him, buried him deep in my unconscious. No matter how far I ran, I carried him with me wherever I went. I was pursued by an infernal, relentless chorus of furies, all with his voice, shrieking that I was worthless, shameless, and a failure. the I don't know how to explain it. Man, there's just something so off-putting about this that like I don't feel bad for this guy. Like I have zero empathy for the way that this guy is. So with that being said, because of my like distaste for him, I'm going to sound very, very dismissive of what he's feeling. Obviously, that does not mean like that these opinions are applicable to the general population. I'm not being dismissive of like mental health issues. And I shouldn't have to say that out loud, but people make it weird in the comments, right? So I do need to say this aloud. What he's saying is all valid feelings, but from a shallow character, it just feels insane. And we'll talk about it more the more and more that we go. But anyway, so this dude becomes a psychotherapist because he has his own problems and he wants to diagnose himself. Ends up figuring out this whole case thing with Alicia, gets obsessed with it, and opens up at the psychiatric hospital where she is being held, and he immediately applies. In chapter 4, it's January. He has started his job at the Grove. It's his first day here, and part of his New Year's resolution. Editing Kaylee here. I just didn't tell you what his New Year's resolution was. I like, to be frank, I burped. In the middle of that, I said, in his New Year's resolution, and then I burped, and so it cut. But I never said it. It was to stop smoking. He like smokes cigarettes quite a bit, and he does throughout the entirety of the book, even though it opens saying how he's trying to stop. Sorry. Does it play an important part? I don't know. It's just something that gets brought up a lot. When he gets there, he meets the head psychiatric nurse guy. His name is Yuri. He's very nice. He's popular amongst the patients and is in general is just kind of like a friendly, you know what I mean? Like bulky guy that's just kind of like whatever about everything. They become friends instantly because like I said, Yuri's cool with everybody. Of note, some of the other characters that we get introduced to is the manager of the Grove, who is very, very strict, and everybody's kind of assuming that she's working for the bad guys because the Grove is up for potential closure. And so they're pretty sure that she's working on the board that's trying to get it closed and that she has been assigned and started working here in the last year, trying to find reasons to close the place down. So there's like some weird tension and animosity from that perspective. And part of her new rules as she came in was all of the people, all of the workers have to carry around an attack alarm. So pretty much just like a little keychain thing that they keep on them, that if something happens with one of the patients, they hit it, it's really, really loud and piercing, and everybody will come running to them. Yuri is directing him to his office, but Theo instead asks if he can take part in a community meeting. That's where all the patients are. That's why it's so quiet at the current moment. And Theo wants to join in on it. You know, he wants to just dive right in. The community meeting is almost like a administrative type thing. Like all of the doctors, the nurses, and the patients will meet together in this room. They'll talk about medications for the day, therapies of the day, what everybody's up to, what are we working on, you know what I mean? To try to give the patients an active role in their care. So when he goes into this community meeting, after in the meeting, we also meet Christian, who is the other doctor there. Turns out Christian and Theo had a kind of almost like a rivalry type thing in college. Like they're aware of each other, and Theo is just not a fan of him whatsoever. Just bad vibes with this doctor, right? And in this meeting, he sits across from Alicia, and at first he doesn't recognize her, doesn't even like register her existence, doesn't see her whatsoever, because she is so doped up on medication. She is not there at all. Like she's looking at him, but the lights are off. You know what I'm saying? It's very, very sad. He clocks it immediately and is not a fan of this in any way. As he's like registering this and realizing, you know, this is this vibrant woman that he's kind of had this weird, I don't know, we've had this buildup for 4 chapters of him to finally meet her, and then it's just like kind of lackluster. And in the middle of him processing this, one of the patients comes in with a broken cue like pool stick, and she is incredibly upset that it's broken. She throws a fit. This particular patient gets brought up quite a few times through the book, and I am not a fan of the way that the character is described and talked about and treated by all the other characters. So I'm going to gloss right on over that and just focus on the story here. And the point being that the community meeting gets interrupted and the other doctors all look at Theo to have him be the one to talk this patient off the ledge. So he like proves himself that he's this like really empathetic, great guy that can calm people down. Did not read that way. Did not read that way. Literally just read like again, pretentious know-it-all. And I know I keep using those words and I can't tell you what it is. I cannot tell you what it is that is driving me so crazy about this guy. But after the meeting, he goes to talk to Lazarus. Lazarus is the guy that testified to get Alicia at the Grove in the first place, the guy that's running the whole place, right? Goes and talks to him. And we find out a little bit more information, particularly that the Grove is in danger, that there's not enough patients, and the costs are too high. And just like, yeah, man, we kind of expect this to probably be shut down in the next 6 months, which is what Theo's mentor had told him as well. And it'll come up here in a minute, but it's like really, really weird that this guy's going to take this job at this place knowing that it's closing down. Just keep all of this in your brain, okay? He then asks if Alicia has ever had one-on-one therapy. As if this guy had never thought of that idea before. As if that had never crossed anyone else's mind before this genius comes in to save the day and save this woman. He's like, yeah, anybody actually tried, has anybody tried to talk to her in the last 6 years that she's been in your care? And Lazarus says, yeah, and it didn't work out very well. And so they've tried putting her in like art therapy, music therapy, all of these other things, and just nothing is working. And so then Theo says, okay, well, you're kind of old though. So what if she like viewed you as like a parental like father figure and that's why she didn't feel comfortable opening up to you? Like maybe she would feel more comfortable with somebody closer to her age. Okay. That's kind of Lazarus's reactions. And he's like, okay, dude, I mean, it's worth a shot, I guess, but, you probably will fail, but sure, we'll go ahead and we'll set it up so you can meet her. And in chapter 7, Theo and Alicia have their very, very first meeting. And as Yuri, the lead nurse guy, goes to get Alicia, Theo is sitting here in this room and he's spiraling, starting to feel worthless because he's like, well, what if I do fail? Like, what if I can't get her to speak? What does that say about me? I suck. He goes on this whole like hearing his father's voice in his head thing. He comes in, or she comes in, doesn't say a word. It is just the most silent, awkward, no one talking moment ever. As we sat there in silence, my head started to throb at the temples, the beginnings of headache, a telltale symptom. I thought of Ruth, that was his like old therapist that he used to go to when he was younger, who used to say, in order to be a good therapist, you must be receptive to your patient's feelings. You must not hold on to them. They are yours. They do not belong to you. In other words, this thumping in my head wasn't my pain. It belonged to Alicia. And this sudden wave of sadness, this desire to die, did not belong to me either. It was hers. All hers. I sat there feeling it for her, my head pounding, my stomach churning for what seemed like hours. Eventually, the 50 minutes were up. And maybe that's what it is. I feel like this is somebody who is trying to write what empathy is and who has never actually felt empathy genuinely in their entire lives before. This feels like if a robot or an alien tried to write a book about empathy. And I feel like there's just a really, really big disconnect. And because this Theo guy gets described as empathetic multiple times or like critiqued for being so sensitive. Interesting. Very, very interesting. So he leaves this meeting, right? This one-on-one, not successful. And so he decides to flip through her file. And it's pretty boring, for somebody who doesn't talk. Really not much ground has been covered in the last 6 years. The only thing of note is there was one incident very early on in her stay where she had attacked the patient who came into the community meeting with the broken pool stick, the very like emotionally charged, angry one. Okay. And so with that, he's like, okay, so there's something happening here. You know what would help? Let's figure out her childhood trauma. I bet her childhood trauma would explain everything that's going on right now. So in her file, her like next of kin is her aunt Lydia. So Alicia's mother passed away when she was young in a car accident, and then Alicia's father passed away a couple of years ago. So that's who Lydia is. Alicia was in said car accident with the mother, but she had survived. And then her solicitor is listed in the file as well. His name is Max Berenson. Turns out this guy is Gabriel's brother. Seems kind of weird that he would be representing the woman or like the go-to legal guy for the woman that killed his brother. But okay. So he tries calling Max. He doesn't pick up. So instead, he calls Aunt Lydia. She says hello. He explains who he is and what he's calling for. And Lydia says, fuck you, and hangs up. Oh, well, this didn't go very well. This is not a very good deep dive so far. So he instead decides that he's going to go back to research and relook at this self-portrait that Alicia had painted, saying this painting was Alicia's sole communication, her only testimony, and it was saying something that I had yet to comprehend. So he's going to leave the Grove for the day, and he runs into Yuri. They end up smoking some cigarettes together, and Yuri invites him to go to the pub. This isn't something that Theo would usually like to do, but he decides to do it now because, why not? So they go out for a drink, and Yuri asks if Theo is married. He says, yes, I'm married to a beautiful woman named Catherine. I call her Kathy, though. Yuri says how he was married, but he was pretty unhappy in his marriage until he fell in love. So I'm presuming you didn't fall in love with your wife, right? Like, that's what you're saying to me. And Yuri laughed and shook his head. No, a woman who lived near me, a very beautiful woman. It was love at first sight. I saw her on the street. It took me a long time to get the courage to talk to her. I used to follow her. I'd watch her sometimes without her knowing. I'd stand outside of her house and look, hoping she would appear at the window. He laughed. This story was starting to make me feel uncomfortable. I finished my beer and glanced at my watch, hoping Yuri would take the hint, but he didn't. One day I tried speaking with her, but she wasn't interested in me. I tried a few times, but she told me to stop pestering her. It was very hard to accept. I was sure we were meant to be together. She broke my heart. I got very, very angry with her, very mad. And what happened? Nothing. Nothing? You stayed with your wife? No, it was over with her, but it took falling for this woman for me to admit it, to face the truth about me and my wife. Sometimes it takes courage, and a long time, to be honest. And he says, okay, I don't really understand why you're telling me this. Like, I'm not sure what the point of this is. And then he goes on to say, let me give you some advice. Go home to your wife, go home to Kathy, who loves you, and leave Alicia behind. So we are on page 45, 13% of the way through the book. We are about to enter the last chapter of part 1, and this guy's already getting clocked and called out for being a little bit too obsessive with this patient that he has only had a one-on-one time with one time. Interesting. Also a really weird thing to say to your brand new coworker, to tell him that you stalked a woman. I'm pretty sure everybody in this book is like living on a completely different planet than anybody else at this rate. What do you mean? So he goes home to his wife, and they end up going to a cafe. We learn a little bit more information about her. She is an American actress, and she's doing a bunch of like Broadway-style shows, and she has dual citizenship between the US and England. When he shows up at the cafe, she's hanging out with a couple of her coworkers and telling this story about how her and Theo met. They were in different relationships, like they were dating two other people, and were introduced because their partners knew each other, and then they ended up hitting it off at a party and then left their partners for each other. So not a great way to start a relationship. But it was like super, super whirlwind romance. He like proposed to her within a month, and they absolutely hit it off. And the only thing to really note in this is he talks about when he was so excited and like so in love with her and stuff. And he had brought her home to meet his parents. And obviously his dad is a piece of crap and was very explicit about this and like treated him poorly in front of his soon to be wife and like wasn't speaking well of her or him or anybody. And so they go to leave. And instead she's like, and I understand now. I understand everything about you. And then just gave him a hug. Which, like, again, I should relate to this guy. I have often, when we leave family functions, Or I, like, my husband finally met my extended family and we were driving home from these, and I just like look at him and I'm just like, yep, hopefully that explains a lot. And he's like, yeah, it does. Like, there have been multiple times where we will leave one of my family members' houses and my husband will just hug me and say, I understand. I have been in this man's shoes in this book. I have heard this from my spouse. And I just like, I can't, like, I can't feel anything. This is so strange for me. And I don't, like I said, I know I keep repeating myself and I'm so sorry if I'm being irritating about it. Something is so hollow. Also, I need to go put on lipstick. My lips are way too pale right now. Hold on. So with that, with the reveal, the confirmation, the whatever about how horrible his childhood was, he and Kathy elope. They go and get married, no family present. That goes into part 2 of the book. And we again open this section with Alicia Brenninson's diary. And yeah, I'm going to say her last name different every single time. Shut up about it. Her diary entries, it's just a couple of them just talking about her remembering her mother and her mother passing away and how her mom was wearing a yellow dress and I believe they were in a yellow car. Yeah, her car was yellow as well. And so her mother like purposefully crashed into a wall. And so now Alicia correlates the color yellow with death. And I thought to myself, is this relevant? Is this little factoid? Will this be relevant? Does this play a key in something? I don't know. Let's find out. And also in the diary, as she's going on about this, she's also talking about how she's currently experiencing like a creative block. And she was in the middle of painting and she was painting Jesus, but she can't get the face right. And she realized why, and it's because the face looks just like her husband, Gabriel. And so she's going to ask Gabriel to sit for her sometime so that hopefully she can get the painting right. Kind of odd, but okay. Back to current day, Theo talking to Lazarus, he wants to lower Alicia's medication because he is like, hey, I looked at the dosages and the way that she's acting and stuff, and this is like way too freaking much medicine. Like, she is literally a zombie right now. This is like not appropriate. Lazarus says, well, talk to her doctor about it. Like, that's Christian's job. You need to talk to him to get that approved. But he picks up on the weird tension between Theo and Christian, and so then Lazarus is just going to go talk to him and figure it out. So the plan is to lower her medication. Okay, that's really all that you need to know from that. In the following chapter, they call it the fish bowl. It's just kind of this like room in the middle with all these windows so they can keep an eye on the patients, but actually it kind of turns out that the patients are rather keeping an eye on them because they're in this like little room together. So he's in there. He and Christian both end up in there together, and we get a little bit more tension and crap talking, and Christian giving him a hard time of like, why are you even here if you know this place is gonna close in 6 months, huh? Like, what's the quote here? Rats desert a sinking ship. They don't clamber aboard. Okay. That's weird. Weirdly aggressive. And Theo doesn't understand why this is so oddly aggressive. But then it gets revealed that Lazarus has already talked to Christian about lowering the medication. So he's offended and he's like, hey, next time you have a problem with the way I'm treating my patients, how about you say it to my face? Understandable. I too would probably be offended. One of the older, I believe she's a psychiatrist. She's some type of like doctor head person in charge over here. And she overhears their conversation and she's like, yeah, I feel so bad for Alicia. She needs someone to take care of her, Theo. And now you're here. I don't think that's a good reaction. I don't, don't think that's a good reaction at all, actually. Everything about this just feels weird. There's just like weird vibes everywhere. So a couple days pass. They have, in fact, already lowered the medication, and Theo and Alicia have yet another session together. It's super quiet, and it's just silent and quiet and awkward between them. And then toward the end of the session, he's like, hey, Alicia, seriously, like, I want to help you. Let me help you. And in response, she gets up and attacks him. Clawing at him, trying to strangle him. Yuri was supposed to be in the room because ever since the first attack that Alicia had on the other patient, there's supposed to be like a one-on-one thing. Like, she should always have a nurse around her, or especially if there's like other people, like she should not be in a room alone with anybody. However, Theo pretty much like begged Yuri to leave them alone so they could like have some privacy, and then immediately gets attacked. Luckily, they have the little alarm thing, so he's able to hit that and get saved. but not before she like completely beats the crap out of him, right? This does not go over very well. There is immediately like a hospital staff meeting afterward where Stephanie, is that her name? Where, you know, Stephanie, Lazarus, Christian, all the other people, they all get together and they say, hey, not appropriate behavior. What in the ever-loving F were you doing in a room all by yourself with a patient, especially a patient like that? And he's like, no, 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 it's going well, you know. She's starting to communicate. Excuse me? They said, yeah, like unconsciously. Like obviously Alicia was reacting to me on some level. I believe it shows how much she wants to communicate. Christian laughed. You call that communication? Yes, I do. Rage is powerful communication. The other patients, the zombies who just sit there, vacant and empty, they've given up. Alicia hasn't. Her attack tells us she can't articulate directly about her pain, her desperation, her anguish. She was telling me not to give up on her, not yet. Christian rolled his eyes. A less poetic interpretation might be that she was off her meds and out of her mind. He turned to Lazarus. I told you this would happen, Professor. I warned you about lowering the dose. It's just like, okay. So in response, he's like, no, guys, seriously, I promise. You know, she just wants to talk to me. Just give me 6 weeks to talk to her and to get through this. Lazarus says, okay, fine. And Christian says, you're going to fail. Alicia's not going to talk, not in 6 weeks or 60 years, which is, again, just very incredibly negative. The way that these healthcare providers talk about their patients, like, I hope to God this isn't in real life how these people talk about others. Like, oh my God, dude. After work, Theo goes home. Kathy is out at a play. She's like out practicing and doing her own thing. And so Theo decides she's going to be gone for a couple hours. So he goes and has his guilty pleasure, which is smoking pot. So he pulls out his little jar of weed, rolls one up, having a good time, chilling, relaxing. Kathy is very, very anti-weed. She views, you know, stoners as like lazy pieces of crap and they're not doing anything good with their lives. And he used to do it throughout college, and it was something that he used to kind of like escape and help him relax and whatnot, but he stopped when they got married. Now, though, there's some weird stress stuff going on in their relationship, and so he has turned to smoking pot. While doing so, he accidentally bumps her laptop, and when it opens up, he sees a bunch of sexual emails between her and a stranger. He's realizing that Kathy is having an affair, and so he vomits. Cut to another work day. He's having another therapy session with Alicia. She is not speaking, and he refers to her as a silent siren luring me to my doom. My guy, don't be her doctor then. This is so strange to me. So he goes on instead, you know, talking about his wife and just yapping to Alicia, hoping that maybe this will, like, you know, incite a reaction or something. Talks about his wife, and he's like, hey, you know, did you love your husband? Like, love encompasses all kinds of feelings. Like, you must have hated him. You must have hated him at the end. And then Alicia storms out of the room. This is like the most reaction that he's ever really gotten other than being blatantly attacked. But he, idiot, I thought to myself, you idiot, what was I doing? I'd pushed her too far, too hard, too soon. It was horribly unprofessional, not to mention totally inept. It revealed far more about my state of mind than hers, but that's what Alicia did for you. Her silence was like a mirror, reflecting yourself back at you, and it was often an ugly sight. Okay, way to just turn this, like, obviously vulnerable woman into your manic pixie dream girl when she's, like, literally not even engaging with you in any way, and you're just, like, completely assigning these traits and things to her. Like, what are you talking about right now, dude? Goes back home. Still dealing with all of the crazy emotions and whatnot from discovering his wife's affair thing. Drinks a bunch of wine, spirals, realizes he needs help, and so he wanders around until he goes to his old therapist's house. Hasn't seen this woman in years. Just like shows up at like 10 p.m. on her doorstep, and she invites him in because she's like, oh, you're not doing well. So he pours his heart out to her, and, you know, Ruth is like, hey, man, you fought so hard to get out of your childhood situation and, you know, not getting over, but you know what I mean, working through this relationship with your father and how horribly that he treated you. You can't then get into a relationship where you're treated like crap and not respected. Like, that's, you know, that's not good for you. It's not good for, you know, your progress or anything. There are so many flies in my house right now. I don't know if you're seeing me have to karate chop them every now and then, but I'm about to lose my mind. Goes on hesitantly. I know how sad you feel, but I want you to consider the possibility that you felt this sadness long before you met Kathy. It's a sadness you've been carrying around for many years. You know, Theo, one of the hardest things to admit is that we weren't loved when we needed it the most. It's a terrible feeling, the pain of not being loved. She was right. I had been groping for the right words to express that murky feeling of betrayal inside, the horrible hollow ache, and to hear Ruth say it, the pain of not being loved. I saw how it pervaded my entire consciousness and was at once the story of my past, present, and future. This wasn't just about Kathy. It was about my father and my childhood feelings of abandonment, my grief for everything I had never had. In my heart, I still believed I never would have. Ruth was saying that was why I chose Kathy. What better way for me to prove my father was correct, that I'm worthless and unlovable, than by pursuing someone who will never love me? I buried my head in my hands. So all of this was inevitable. That's what you're saying. I set myself up for this. It's fucking hopeless. He begs her to tell him to leave his wife. And so the session ends when she does as much. And she's like, I don't think you could ever go back even if you wanted to. So Theo leaves the house. He plans on going home and confronting his wife and leave her. But when he gets home, I don't want to say chickens out because that's rude, but he changes his mind. He has a little bit of a change of heart because he realizes that like he wouldn't be able to live without her, that it would feel like cutting off a limb. And so he's like, maybe we'll just wait and she'll confess one day and like I'll forgive her for everything as long as, you know, it'll come out. It'll be fine. Everything will be good. But before that, in the middle of that, I guess, rather, as he's processing everything, she instead confronts him about smoking pot. And she's like, because he forgot to put it away earlier, got distracted, whatever. And she's like, you know, what the hell, dude? What's this about? Sometimes I feel like I just don't know you at all. And, you know, he obviously is like, well, that's exactly what I was thinking about you. And he ends up crying himself to sleep that night. And the next day, he kind of comes to the decision that he is just going to act like nothing ever happened. Nope, didn't happen. None of that was real. It's all fake, and completely ignores Ruth's advice. And instead decides that he's just going to be like, yeah, I never read those emails. And I have to stay strong for my patients and for myself. In chapter 11 of part 2, he goes back to the Grove and he decides that he is going to finally ask the patient, like, what happened and why Alicia attacked her way earlier, like in this, like, visit, you know, like that was one of the early things he found out in her file. He's finally going to get to the bottom of it. Goes and talks to the patient. She says she had asked Alicia if he deserved it. Did your husband deserve what you did to him? And Alicia's reaction was to attack her and try to end her life. So while helpful, not really helpful at all. And instead he goes outside and he ends up getting a call from Max. Max being Gabriel's brother, her lawyer, blah, 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 right? He explains who he is, and reluctantly Max agrees to talking to him. He'll just have to come out to Max's office and have the conversation, which is exactly what he does the very next day. He shows up to Max's office and they start talking about Alicia. He's like, hey, you know, I'm not here to talk to her lawyer. I'm here to talk to you as her brother-in-law. You know, like, how was she acting? What was her state of mind before this happened? Like, how were you feeling? You know, like trying to just get like a feel for maybe like her mental state when all of this happened. He's like, I mean, she's maybe a little bit more jumpy than usual, but pretty normal otherwise. And then eventually he goes on to admit that he absolutely hated her, that she had even threatened to kill Gabriel before, and she had these like violent mood swings and these rages, and she was just this like crazy woman. And then also makes kind of like a little comment, a little baby comment, mentioning how Alicia had tried to end her life after her father died. So, okay, didn't know anything about that. That's kind of weird. That wasn't in her records anywhere. Max is done with the conversation. He goes to leave to get his jacket because he's like ending his day. And while he's doing so, Theo is left alone in the room with Max's secretary, who also happens to be his wife. And she says, if you really want to know more about Alicia, you have to go and see her cousin Paul in Cambridge. Ask him about the night of the accident. And then Max comes back in and she stops talking and she clams up and acts like this conversation never happened. And Theo is like, oh, I think she's afraid of Max. That's really weird. She's like really terrified of him. They're getting all ready to leave and stuff. And Max makes yet another comment. And he's like, hey, and also like, if you're just here to gossip, like if you just want some gossip, you need to go and talk to Jean Felix, which is the painter guy, right? The like gallery owner, old friend of hers. He's like, yeah, you should go and talk to him. Okay, awesome. Now Theo's got like a whole list of to-dos to try to figure out more about this woman. But before we get to his, deep divey adventures, we get another entry, or entries rather, of Alicia's diary. And in this portion of it, we learn about Gabriel keeping a gun in the house and how much she doesn't like it. And they have had like really, really tumultuous arguments about keeping a gun in the home, to the point that Gabe would get like so angry and so just enraged. Like she was like, I didn't even know who he was anymore. Like I didn't even recognize this person. Then there's another entry talking about how Max had come over to visit one day and how much she's afraid of Max because he had tried to like make a pass at her. Like I think he had like forcefully kissed her at one of the parties one time. And she's like, I'm going to tell your brother. And he's like, you're not going to tell her, blah, blah, blah. And they had this like whole back and forth thing where Max is like, you love me. It's really, really weird. Like literally all the men in her life are terrible, right? Entry about that and how Max is actually secretly in love with her and trying to like get with her or something and just being a douchebag. And then the final entry is talking about how, Gabriel wants to have kids with her and she's terrified to have kids because she has her mother's blood in her, right? Like her mother trying to end her own life and trying to end Alicia's life. She's like, I can't have a kid. I can't pass these genes on. Like I'm not going to do that. But when Gabriel does ask her, she's so overjoyed and agrees. So what in the heck is happening? What is true? Cut back to Theo in current day. And he placed a follow-up phone call to Max because he's like, wait, so if she had attempted to like end her own life before, she must have had treatment of some sort and it's not in any of her records. And so he calls Max to try to get more information about this. And it really, really pisses Max off and says that they had some private doctor come over to keep the incident quiet. And then he goes on to ask if Alicia was the primary beneficiary for Gabriel's will. And Max reveals instead that no, she is not. I am. And then he gets really, really pissy and ends up hanging up on Theo. Later that day, Theo gets a call from Lazarus because Max complained. Max was a lawyer. Max was like, I'm going to sue your ass. Stop being nosy. I'm being harassed. This guy's like harassing me. Tell him to knock it off. And so Lazarus does. He says, you're going this the wrong way and you're asking questions. You're searching for clues like it's a detective story. And tells him, just, dude, literally do your freaking job and just stick to therapy. You're not allowed to visit like any of Alicia's relatives anymore. You're not allowed to talk to any of them anymore. Like chill the hell out. Just like do your job. Talk to the woman. Figure something out. Like, what are you doing? You're like, again, you're playing detective. Like, what is even happening right now? Why would any of this ever seem like it was a good idea? He immediately doesn't listen. Literally driving himself out to Cambridge to go and find Paul, her cousin, because this is what Tanya, the, I guess technically sister-in-law, told him to do, like Max's wife. Because again, he's like, I have to go out here. I have to, I have to talk to her cousin Paul. I have to talk to her Aunt Lydia. I have to figure out what happened in what happened to her to shape her into this person. And obviously his like internal justification for all of this is because if I can't get Alicia to talk, like I have to figure it out somehow. So this was the house where Alicia had been born. It was where she spent the first 18 years of her life. Within these walls, her personality had been formed, the roots of her adult life. All causes and subsequent choices were buried here. So he shows up to this house and he's looking in the window and there's this like creepy, ugly, grotesque woman's face in the window. And that's literally how he like describes it. The way that this character describes other characters is gross and I don't enjoy it. He sees this woman's face in the window and then it like peeks away, it goes behind the blinds. And then before he knows it, he hears footsteps and then he gets cracked on the back of the head by a baseball bat. Turns out cousin Paul thought that he was there like scoping out the place and was about to rob them. And so he hits him over the head with this. He comes back to consciousness. Paul is standing over him. And he's like, I already checked your ID. I thought maybe you were here to rob us or you were like a news reporter or something, but I see you work at the hospital where Alicia's at. So what's up? He's like, well, I have a couple questions for you. Oh, okay. Yeah, come inside. He finds out Paul and Aunt Lydia moved into the house when Paul's dad died, right? So it was supposed to be, what it was like Alicia and her two parents, mom's sister, Aunt Lydia, and then Paul. They moved in It was supposed to be temporary, but then Alicia's mom died. And so then the 4 of them ended up just like staying there, right? The cousins, the dad, and the aunt. They all just ended up staying there because it was just easier for everybody. And then, yeah, Alicia's dad died a couple of years ago, and he had taken his own life in the attic of the house. Good God. He then goes on to say how the last time that he saw Alicia was at her dad's funeral, and also that he doesn't believe it, that Alicia's not a violent person, and he doesn't think that she actually murdered Gabriel. And then as they're continuing to have the conversation and maybe have a little bit more, you know, philosophical, deeper stuff there, Aunt Lydia yells down from the attic, or like the upstairs area, yells downstairs and demands that Theo goes up there to talk to her. And so he does. And she appears like super, super angry and maybe has dementia or something. There was a madness in her gaze. I felt quite sure of that. Then she goes on to say that Alicia was a little bitch and that she always had been ever since she was a little girl, and how she's like always hated her and how she was so ungrateful for everything that she did for her. And just like, literally again, not a single good person in this book. Like, this is just a bad situation across the board. And the main reason that she is so angry toward Alicia as well is because one of the final paintings that Alicia had done, right, the one that had gone up in the gallery, was a very, very like grotesque picture depicting Aunt Lydia, and she didn't have permission about it prior, nor had Aunt Lydia had seen it. She literally went to like the gallery and had seen it in person with all of the other like patrons of the establishment. Not sure why I phrased it that way. And saw it when everybody else did and was like, oh my freaking God, got so angry, and has like completely written off Alicia since then. And when he goes, so Theo's like, okay, well, I think it's about time for me to leave. When he does, he leaves and he's thinking to himself, hold on, I need to read you this because it was like so ridiculous. I had taken an instant and violent dislike to Lydia, probably because she reminded me of my father. I would have ended up like Paul if I had stayed in the house, if I had stayed with my parents in Surrey at the beck and call of a madman. I felt depressed all the way back to London. Sad, tired, close to tears. I couldn't tell if I was feeling Paul's sadness or my own. Okay. When he gets home, Kathy's not there. She's like out at practice again or dinner with a friend or something. And so he opens up her laptop to try to go through her emails again because he's like, maybe I was misremembering, right? Like I was high at the time. Yeah. So maybe I just need proof. I have to see this with my own eyeballs. And she's logged out of her email. And so then he spirals even more. And, you know, he's like, on the surface, like nothing in our relationship has changed, but like internally, it's just like festering. She eventually does come home and says that she's going to meet with her friend Nicole for dinner later that week. And so Theo's like, okay, well, this is it. This is how I'm going to find out. Like, I'm going to follow her, figure out if what she's telling me is the truth or if she's lying to me. Okay. In the meantime, though, he decides that he is in fact going to go and talk to Jean Felix and you know, get some more information from that perspective. He immediately expresses his like strong dislike for Max and for Gabriel. And it's very, very clear that maybe there was some jealousy stuff like between the two of them, like Gabriel jealous of Jean or vice versa. And again, like I had said earlier, she and John go all the way back to like art school. They had some of their first jobs together and just been friends forever, you know? Theo, her paintings, and there's 4 of them. So the one is the car crash, depicting the car crash that had killed her mother. The second is Jesus on the cross with Gabriel's face. The third is the one of Lydia, Aunt Lydia, and the fourth is the self-portrait. And so this time though, he notices this like new detail in it. And there's this like bowl of apples in the painting, and the apples have maggots in them. Okay, well, that's kind of weird. In response to this, Jean just encourages him to read Alcestis. And then at the very end of their like conversation, he asks Jean about, you know, her father ending his own life and then Alicia's response trying to end hers, and how this must be like indicative of how close she was with her father and how much that she loved him. And he like laughs at this. Jean does. And he's like, no, she hated her father. Oh, maybe it was guilt, perhaps. Who knows? There was something he wasn't telling me, I thought. Something didn't fit. Something was wrong. Do we ever come back to that? I don't think so. Again, so often in this book, I was like, is this, there's so many, I guess it's, what is it, like red herrings? I don't know, man. So he also asks John if she knew of her having any doctors or anything. And he says, no, I don't remember his name or anything. I have no idea. Sorry, bud. And they part ways. When we go into chapter 21, following his advice, he goes and reads Alcestis. And I'll go ahead and read this to you because it's interesting, okay? We're kind of reading like a little Greek play together, guys. How fun, how different, how cool. I started reading it on the tube. Not exactly a page-turner. The hero, Admetus, is condemned to death by the fates, but thanks to Apollo's negotiating, he's offered a loophole. Admetus can escape death if he can persuade someone else to die for him. He asks his mother and father to die in his place, and they refuse in no uncertain terms. It's hard to know what to make of Admetus. Not exactly heroic behavior, and the ancient Greeks must have thought of him a bit of a twit. Alcestis is made of stronger stuff. She steps forward and volunteers to die for her husband. Perhaps she doesn't expect Admetus to accept her offer, but he does, and Alcestis dies and departs for Hades. It doesn't end there, though. There is a happy ending of sorts. A deus ex machina, I think is how you say it. Heracles seizes Alcestis from Hades and provides her triumphantly to the land of the living. She comes alive again. Admetus is moved to tears by the reunion with his wife. Alcestis' emotions are harder to read. She remains silent. She doesn't speak. I sat up with a jolt as I read this. I couldn't believe it. I read the final page of the play again. Slowly, carefully. Alcestis returns from death, alive again, and she remains silent. Unable or unwilling to speak of her experience, Admetus appeals to Heracles in desperation. My wife stands here, but why does she not speak? No answer is forthcoming. The tragedy ends with Alcestis being led back into the house by Admetus in silence. Why? Why does she not speak? I don't know. So the following chapter is more diary entries. This is from August 2nd to August 6th. Keep in mind, she ended her husband's life on the 25th, okay? In this, though, we're getting more and more information about how crappy the people in her life was. She gets a phone call from Paul, her cousin. You know, the one that said that he hadn't seen her since her father's funeral years ago. Just kidding, it's a lie. He calls her and says, hey, I'm in trouble. Can you meet me? She says, oh my God, yeah, totally. She meets him, and Paul reveals that he has a gambling problem, and he is like $20,000 in debt, and he doesn't know what to do, and he owes money to the wrong people, and he needs money as soon as possible, or it's like not going to be very good. And no, of course, Aunt Lydia doesn't know about this. Don't tell her. Okay, so she's like put on the spot and doesn't really know what to do. She ends up writing her cousin like a $2,000 check. He looks disappointed by the amount, but he takes it and he leaves. She tells Gabriel about it later. He's really upset with her for giving her cousin money. And in another entry, she talks about Jean Felix and how she's like not happy with their friendship. She has come to the realization that like their friendship solely relies on him using her, and all he has ever wanted is like her artwork. And he is really annoying, actually. Actually, I don't even like him. And it's just out of habit or out of loyalty, I guess, or something, and it's just not a good situation anymore, and she doesn't want to continue to show her art pieces in his gallery. And so she decides to tell him that. On this day, he shows up at her house unannounced and is just really pissing her off and driving her up the freaking wall. And so she tells him, she's like, she meant to do it casually and gently and over time, but she got put on the spot and frustrated. And so she reveals this to him, that she wants to change galleries, and he is angry. He's upset, and he, pressures her to see a play that weekend with him, which is Alcestis. He's like, I already bought the tickets for it. Like, you might as well come with me. We already had this agreement. Like, come on, man, blah, 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 blah. She says yes to this and ends the diary entries by saying she's afraid of Jean Felix. We cut back to Theo. He's talking to Lazarus about Alcestis. I seriously feel like I'm just saying it different the entire time, okay? Talking to him about the play, and he's like, hey, seriously, like, I don't know what this means. I don't know the significance of this. Like, I'm needing some guidance here. And Lazarus asks him, how would you feel if the person you love most in the world condemned you to die through their own cowardice? That's quite the betrayal. Have you ever been betrayed before? This question obviously makes Theo spiral after everything that is going on. He's like, oh my God, like, you know what I mean? Yes. Internally, he's like, yes. So yeah, that would make me angry, but not just like angry, but so, I don't know, it's like this inexplicable feeling of like betrayal, and that level of anger is just like completely different. So he says, okay, with that, can we try to get her to paint? Like, I know she has a paint therapist or art therapy person, but like, I think she needs to paint like by herself, totally alone. I'll get her supplies, I'll take care of it. But if she does that, maybe she'll be able to communicate her feelings. Maybe she just can't do it verbally. Lazarus okays this. Theo then goes to talk to her current art therapist about doing so. And the art therapist says she's happy to like get Alicia off of her hands because she is the least responsive, most uncommunicative bitch that I have ever worked with. And yet again, I can only hope that this is not how real healthcare providers talk about their patients. So Theo's talking to Alicia. He tells her that he has talked to Jean Felix and has seen all of her paintings, including Alcestis, and, you know, shows her a copy of the play that he read. And then he asks her, why does she not speak? I'm asking you the same question that Amidus asked. Why are you not talking, Alicia? What is it that you cannot say? And then he tells her that he has arranged it so that she'll have like private art therapy. So she'll be able to paint on her own. And this elicits a smile. Pretty much the first one, like full eye contact smile that she has given him thus far. We have finally cracked the shell. We're making progress, whatever you want to call it. So afterward, Theo runs into Christian at the cafeteria. They're having a little bit of back and forth, and Christian has overheard the rumor. It's not really a rumor, but Christian has overheard. It's a small hospital. He knows that Theo has arranged this for Alicia to be able to paint, and so he gives him a heads up, and he says, hey, borderlines are seductive. So just be careful, Alicia will turn on you. And goes on this entire thing. I guess the assumption is that Alicia has borderline personality disorder. If you've watched any of my videos, there's often times where I make that noise, where I go, there's a particular face that I make when there is maybe more that I want to say that I can't for one reason or another, or maybe I just don't want to put that much on the internet, but that like is just me acknowledging of like, that sure is something in a negative way, you know what I'm saying? So anyway, with this warning from Christian of like, hey, very clearly you're emotionally involved in this woman, and also very clearly you should be afraid of her because she's a borderline. And clearly you have already, you know, fallen for this seductress. They move on. Theo goes home. He runs into Kathy as she heads off to rehearsal and saying how afterwards she's going to meet with her friend Nicole. Remember that? We talked about that a while ago. And this is the time that he's going to follow her. So he does. He like waits outside super creepily. She comes out really, really late after rehearsal's already over. He follows her through the city, and she is actually genuinely meeting her friend Nicole. He's met Nicole previously, he knows who she is, and that's who shows up. Meets her on the corner, and they go into a restaurant bar thing and whatever. At least in this particular instance, no, she didn't lie to him. And he's surprised and oddly disappointed. I feel like we should psychoanalyze that reaction a little bit more, but that's okay. So we cut to Theo and Yuri, right, the head nurse guy, introducing Alicia to her new painting space, right, her private painting space, and she's happy. She's content. She's at ease. She immediately begins painting, and over the next couple of days, Theo sits in and is like watching her paint, and she ends up painting a photo of the Grove, right, the psychiatric hospital, and it's burning down. And there's only two people in it, and they are running out of the fire, and it is a man holding a woman. The woman clearly being Alicia, the man clearly being Theo, but the way that it's painted, he can't tell if he's saving her from the fire or about to throw her in it. Wouldn't it just be the angle? What do you mean? Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Next thing we know, the neighbor, her name is Barbie, the neighbor who called the cops when Alicia killed Gabriel, she called the cops saying like, hey, I heard, these like shots ring out, come to the house. She comes to visit Alicia. She comes every now and then, she thinks that they're best friends, and Alicia opens up to her all the time and how close they were and like, oh my God, I can't believe any of this. So she's here to visit Alicia. With the new hospital lead person, Stephanie, there's like some new policies and whatnot that require calling ahead and like approval of visits, and Barbie goes all Karen mode on them of like, well, I've never had to do that before and I'm here now, and it's more difficult to see somebody than it is to get a reservation at this like real bougie place. Whatever. They end up working around it, and Theo talks to Barbie and takes Barbie to go and see Alicia. There's a little bit of stuff that we learn. I mean, really not like too terribly much, except for the one very, very, very critical piece where Alicia had opened up to Barbie a couple of weeks before the murder that she had a stalker, and she had even taken a photo of the man. She pulls up the photo, she shows it to Theo. Barbie pulls up the photo, shows it to Theo. It's really blurry. Alicia had taken it, had shared it with Barbie. Barbie's now showing Theo, right? You know what I'm saying? It's really, really blurry. It looks like it's just of a tree. And she's like, no, no, no. Look at that like weird, dark, squiggly patch right there. That's very clearly the outline of a man. Yeah, she had opened up to me that she had been being stalked, and she always felt the presence of somebody looking in her windows all the time. And she said that she didn't tell Gabriel though, because she was afraid that he would think that she was crazy or something. And so I'm the only one she opened up to. And when, after the murder, I tried telling the cops that that's who it could have been, and that might have been what happened, but nobody wanted to believe me because of Barbie's personality, right? She's very caring, she's very overbearing, she's very like whatever. So nobody took her serious at the time. He says, okay, okay, okay. He's like taking in all this information. The next day, there's an incident. It turns out the patient that I keep referring to very, very vaguely, who Alicia had initially attacked when the patient had asked her if her husband deserved it, said patient defaced this new painting that Alicia painted of the grove burning down. And this patient wrote slut on it. Oh, so Alicia attacked her with a paintbrush to the eyeball. Very gruesome, very violent. And so Theo decides to ask her about it more and be like, hey, so like, what triggered that reaction? Hey, yeah, I know it's really extreme. I know Alicia stabbed you in the eyeball. I know you're like, you got a patch on right now, but like, what did you say to her to make this happen? Did anything else happen other than putting slut on the painting? Because that, what's going on? And she's like, no, no, no. It wasn't even that triggered her. What triggered her was I told her the truth. I told her that you're in love with her. And that's what made her attack me. Oh. And so the patient goes on to say, yeah, she's a, quote, fucking nutter, and, quote, a psycho. And Theo can't help but wonder if she is right. Is she right about him loving her? Is she right about the psycho thing? I don't know. Neither does Theo. And so as we go into the final chapter, or chapters, actually, the final two chapters, I guess, of part 2, there's another meeting with like Christian, Lazarus, Stephanie, Theo, right? All of the like big hospital people that they say, hey man, maybe your therapy's not working. Ever since you started talking to Alicia, she has attacked you. She has attacked another patient. Like this isn't going very good. I think you should stop talking to her. He pushes back. They say, no, seriously, we are literally about to get closed down. There's so much violence happening. This is like completely inappropriate. Like stay away from her. He ignores this in the final chapter of part 2. And he has this like very, very final last meeting, heartfelt thing with her where he sits with her. And he's like, hey, I feel angry that our work is ending before we've even properly begun. I feel angry that you didn't try harder, that you didn't care. You didn't want to make this happen. In which case, again, I feel like we are projecting a manic pixie dream girl standards onto a vulnerable woman who is over medicated in a hospital that like we don't know if she belongs there or not. And we're just, I don't know, projecting so much onto her. And this man is really pissing me the frick off, right? We'll talk about it. I know. Shut up if you've read this book, okay? So, with all of that being said, her reaction to him, she hands him her diary with the intention for him to read it. And so, in part 3, we get the remainder of Alicia's diary. These are entries ranging from August 8th to August 25th, the day of the murder. This is when she first begins writing in the diary about how she feels that she is being stalked, that she like notices this like constant presence of a man whenever she looks out the window, and it's like really, really uncomfortable. And she tries telling Gabriel about it, but Gabe thinks that it is Jean Felix, because she's previously expressed concern about Jean Felix and like calling things off with him and saying that she doesn't want to go to his like art thing anymore. And so he's like, well, maybe it's your friend. And she's like internally like, yeah, maybe it is, but I don't know. I don't think that it is. And so she tells Barbie, right? So this is where Barbie got that initial information. And it evolves to the point where Gabriel says, Alicia, I need you to literally shut the F up about a stalker. There's nobody here. There's not some mystery man. I feel like you're going crazy again, and like you're being delusional, and you need to go to your psychoanalyst, your psychotherapist, your doctor guy, Dr. West, who she had gone to. This was the like privately hired off the books, keep it quiet doctor that she went to after trying to end her own life, after her father ended his life, right? So Gabriel says, okay, you're clearly not doing well, girl. You obviously, you need to go back to him. Obviously, you're having these like paranoid delusions again. And so she goes to this doctor, she plays along, and he prescribes her like antipsychotics. She's secretly not taking them though, because she wants to be alert, because she knows that there is in fact a stalker. She's not imagining this, like there is an actual threat, and she like needs to be prepared in case this escalates in some way. And then beyond that, she also starts like hiding her diary because she's afraid that Gabe will find it and go through it and read it, and it'll be like a whole thing. So there's like a little bit of paranoia, a little bit of like, we're again the unreliable narrator. We really start firming up this idea of like, is she telling the truth? Is this diary reflective of reality? Is this paranoid delusions? Is this like unmedicated, like mental health crises? Like, what are we dealing with here, right? You start really kind of questioning all of this. And on August 24th, the night before the murder, Alicia goes to dinner with her husband, Max, and Max's new wife, partner, lady person, Tanya, his secretary that we met way earlier in the book, right? That Theo knows. Again, Max being Gabriel's brother, the lawyer. He is Alicia's lawyer currently, blah, 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 right? It's all these like connections. He continues to be really, really creepy to her. Like confronts her in a hallway, or she confronts him or whatever about him being a pervert and how he needs to knock it off. Tanya sees them, very clearly angry, but the anger is geared toward Max, not Alicia. Like it's very clear that like Tanya knows that there's like some weird shenanigans afoot, you know what I'm saying? So she storms out of the restaurant, and with that, Alicia's like, okay, so I know Max isn't the stalker. Because that was part of the discussion. Part of the discussion of like the confrontation was like, hey, you're being a creep. Hey, I think you might be stalking me. And his reaction to it and Tanya's reaction to it, she's like, okay, maybe he's not the stalker. If he's not the stalker, Jean Felix isn't the stalker. This is weird. I don't know who it could be. And on August 25th, the day of the murder, she writes in her diary that Gabriel, he had a thing to go to, and so he would be gone until like 8 o'clock. But she notices the stalker outside. She continues writing. There's like banging on the door. She hears it. She hears all this. And then she's like, I hear footsteps. The stalker, he is inside of the house. And we go to part 4. In part 4, Theo has just finished reading Alicia's diary. Theo and us, like as the reader, we're on the same page now, right? There's a lot of questions. A lot of unanswered questions, and Theo is really, really determined to get these. And the first and like most pressing is, who is this doctor? Who is this doctor that she saw, and who is this doctor that prescribed her this medication? There was something else I needed to check. Dr. West, the doctor who treated Alicia, an important character witness with vital information on her state of mind at the time of the murder. Yet Dr. West hadn't testified at Alicia's trial. Why not? No mention was made of him at all. Until I saw his name in her diary, it was as if he didn't exist. How much did he know? Why had he not come forward? Dr. West. It couldn't be the same man. It had to be a coincidence. Surely, I needed to find out. I put the diary in my desk drawer, locking it. Then almost immediately I changed my mind. I unlocked the drawer and took out the diary. Better keep it on me. Safer not to let it out of my sight. I slipped it into the pocket of my coat. I left my office. I went downstairs and walked along the corridor until I reached a door at the end. I stood there for a moment, looking at it. A name was inscribed on the sign on the door. Dr. C. West. I didn't bother to knock. I opened the door and I went inside. Went inside, you say? Went inside Dr. Christian West's office. Yes, his rival, this guy that he has had this beef with this entire time. It turns out that Christian, or Dr. West, was her like secret unofficial doctor. Gabriel and Christian had gone to school together. They were like old buddies, and he had reached out to him about doing some stuff off of the books. He agreed to it, and Christian pretty much like begs Theo to not say anything about it because he didn't claim the income on his taxes. Yeah, that's like the distinguishing factor. Not the fact that like, you know, hey, I went against my like moral and ethical code and was like, you know, doing X, Y, and Z off the books. But no, like just don't report me because the IRS will kick my ass. Oh, okay. So in turn, Theo is like, okay, fine. I won't tell anybody. I won't report it, whatever. Just like, tell me everything that you know about Alicia. And so Christian goes on to describe about how she was highly paranoid. She was delusional, like psychotic even. That's a direct quote, by the way. And Theo brings up the stalker of like, you know, hey, so what about that? Like, what's going on? What's going on with the stalker? And Christian doesn't believe it. He's like, no, she was delusional. I don't believe that for even a fraction of a second, that was ever even a factor into any of this. Okay. All right. So then he goes on and he's like, okay, so what about like her, when you met her, when you became her doctor, that was after her attempt to end her life after her father, like whole situation. Like, what do you think about that? And Christian goes on to say, I don't think that's what it was. I don't think she actually intended to end her life. She's too narcissistic to do that. She was doing it for attention. Specifically, she was doing it for Gabriel's attention. Oh, that's interesting. And so they end this discussion with deciding that Theo, needs to go and talk to Alicia to get some more answers. Because maybe he doesn't really believe everything that's coming out of Gabe's mouth. Maybe Gabe's covering his, or not Gabe. Christian's covering his ass. Maybe there's like other stuff happening, right? Just kind of weird to say the least. And so we go into chapter 4 is having his like one-on-one with Alicia. And he's like, hey, read your diary, talked to Dr. West, Christian. There's a lot that's like not adding up. Like a lot of it's not making any sense between, you know, the testimony, the evidence, your diary, what he says. Like there's a lot of like really, really weird stuff going on. Thank you so much for sharing this diary with me, this information. I appreciate you trying to like open this way of communication. However, I will need to do further investigation, and I hope that you understand that. Doesn't react, doesn't say anything back, and so he takes her silence as a yes, which is quite possibly the most disgusting thing I've ever had to read sentence-wise in a book. Takes her silence as a yes. He returns her diary to her, and he leaves. We go into chapter 5 of part 4. We're nearing the end, like 70-ish% at this point. We go back to the weird subplot thing where Kathy is cheating on Theo. On this particular day, she's like, hey, I'm gonna go for a walk. And he says, okay, babe, totally awesome. And he follows her while she goes on said walk. And she ends up walking to a park. She meets up with her like affair partner. They end up boning in the woods in the park. And he listens to it? Okay. And then we're left on like a cliffhanger. Cut back to, he is confronting Jean-Felix about the stuff that he learned from Alicia's diary of like her wanting to leave his gallery and being like, hey, that's kind of weird. How did you take that? How did you take those feelings? Because last time you and I talked, it was like you guys were on good terms, but clearly you weren't, like WTF. And John Felix is like, no, whatever whoever told you that is a liar. And Theo's like, oh no, she's not a liar. It was written in her diary. I didn't know Alicia kept a diary. Well, she did. And the only reason that I say this is because it's relevant, because like, no shit, 3 other characters in this book also say, I didn't know Alicia kept a diary. I'm pretty sure earlier in the confrontation with Christian, that was exactly what the reaction was as well. Well, I didn't know Alicia kept a diary. Well, I didn't know Alicia kept a diary. Shut the fuck up. You're telling me you couldn't reword that? You're telling me you couldn't get that point across in some other way? Or that, like, is this indicative of a bigger issue? Again, we'll talk about it at the end because I don't want to, like, say too much currently, right? Stick around if you want to hear my theories. So he says, okay, well, yikes, you read the diary, you know how it really is. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, she was planning on leaving the gallery. What do you want? He says, nothing. I was just looking for confirmation. So he leaves. His next confrontation is Max. So he calls him and he says, hey, I read this diary. Alicia said that you had romantic feelings for her. I was wondering if, and then Max hangs up on him yet again. Okay. Not going well. So he calls Paul, Alicia's cousin, and he says, hey, can you meet me in a pub? I need to talk to you about some stuff. Paul says, yes. They meet in this pub, have a little bit of conversation, and he's like, hey, dude, I'm going to cut to the chase here. Tanya, Max's wife, told me to ask you about the accident, when Alicia's mom died and the night after and blah, blah, blah. Paul says, oh my God, Tanya, she's so nice to me. There's like some implication and like reference and stuff to Paul being childlike as though he's like emotionally or like, whatever, stunted in some way, as though he's like a 7 to 9 year old, I believe he's like referenced as. It's like, again, really weird. The way characters get talked about is like really, really weird. And so Paul says, yeah, Tanya's really, really nice. I see why she would say that to you. How about you come home with me? Hello? Theo does. The intent is, he's like, hey, I'm going to show you what she's talking about. So they go back to the house. Aunt Lydia's and Paul's house, right? The house that Alicia grew up in. And they go up onto the roof. The roof is where Paul and Alicia used to go to like escape everybody because no one else could climb the ladder because the dad and the aunt were such like out of shape, like obese pieces of shit that they literally couldn't climb a ladder. Quite literally how it's described in the book. And so this was where they would go to when they were kids and like teenagers to like drink beer and gossip and hang out and whatever. And so after Alicia's mom died, they go up here. Alicia's dad, Aunt Linda, are calling after them. They ignore it and they stay silent and they don't say anything. Eventually, the dad goes on to say to Aunt Lydia, why did she have to die? Why didn't Alicia die instead? Alicia, I think like 12 years old, hears this. Here's her dad wishing that she died in place of her mother. Alicia looks over to Paul and says, he killed me. Dad just killed me. And Theo is speechless and he realizes like, this is what I've been looking for. Like I found it. This is the missing piece of the puzzle. Of all places, I find it on a roof in Cambridge. And he's like, this moment, her hearing her father say that was the traumatizing event that led her to be capable of killing her husband 20 years later. Okay. Okay. I'm not laughing. I'm not laughing. This is serious and this is bad and like nothing is good, okay? The quote I have highlighted, just as Admetus had physically condemned Alcestis to die, so had her father physically condemned his daughter to death. Admetus must have loved Alcestis on some level, but there was no love in Vernon, her father. Rose, just hate. He had committed psychic infanticide, and Alicia knew it. He killed me, she had said. Dad just killed me. Now, at last, I had something to work with, something I knew about, the emotional effects of psychological wounds on children and how they manifest themselves later in adults. Imagine it. Hearing your father, the very person you depend on for survival, wishing you dead. How terrifying that must be for a child. How traumatizing. How your sense of self-worth would implode and the pain would be too great, too huge to feel. You would swallow it, repress it, bury it. Over time, you would lose contact with the origins of your trauma, disassociate the roots of its cause, and forget. But one day, all the hurt and anger would burst forth like fire from a dragon's belly, and you would pick up a gun. You'd visit the rage not upon your father, who was dead and forgotten and out of reach, but upon your husband, the man who had taken his place in your life, who loved you and shared your bed. You'd shoot him 5 times in the head without possibly knowing why. The train raced through the night back to London. At last, I thought. At last, I knew how to reach her. Now, we could begin. Begin what? Is my question. What is even happening? Yet again, I am brought back to this question of like, what in the ever-loving F are you talking about? Is anybody talking about? Is even going on? Maybe this is the Capricorn in me, and I hate bringing up horoscopes. Maybe this is like the seriousness in me of like, not credibility. What would it called? What would it be called? Like, oh my God, integrity maybe? Of something of these like jobs. If you take on a job like this, I feel like there's rules and there's boundaries and there's decorum. And this man is breaking every single one of these right now, okay? I'm just like losing my mind reading about the way that he is like going about all of these things. And so in chapter 9, part 4, chapter 9, he goes back to the Grove, right? The mental hospital, the psychiatric hospital where Alicia is, and he tells her what he has learned from Paul. And he says, what your father said is tantamount to psychic murder. He killed you. And this is like one of the first times that she like looks up again directly at him, full eye contact. And he goes on to say that like, this is the last time that I'm going to be able to talk to you. Like, I have gone against every directive and order from my superiors to be here right now. Like, I am so disappointed that you won't talk to me. I'm so disappointed that like our sessions haven't gone anywhere. Like, this is absolutely horrific. And so finally she mumbles something and he says, "Excuse me, did you just say something?" She says, "Okay, what?" So ending the appointment on the okay, this verbal breakthrough, this, how did he described it as like a creaking door of her using her vocal cords again. They end the appointment, right? You don't want to push too hard. You don't want to whatever. Immediately rushes to Lazarus's office and says, "Hey, you know, I cracked the code. I broke it. She talked to me. She said something." Says, "Oh my God, I'm so proud of you." And Theo gets this like flicker of like paternal recognition of like, you know, like a dad saying they're proud of you. And so the plan is during the next session, that Alicia will tell him like her story. First, the story of her silence. You know, why did she choose this? Why did this happen? And then the story of Gabriel's murder. So it's exactly what happens in the following chapters. She initially says that she stopped talking because after he died, she tried to, and just no words would come out. It was like a trauma response. Like just, there was nothing. There's nothing to say. Nothing would happen. And then eventually it was pointless. Like it was too late. Like what could she have said that would have changed anything? And so then he's like, "Okay, so why are you talking now?" "Well, because of you. I want you to understand what happened the night that my husband died." Oh, oh, okay. So the next day when they have their appointment, she tells him all about the murder. And so it picks up where her diary ended, like in the previous part where we got to that of the stalker had entered the home. And so she starts telling us about how he had entered the home, had tied her up, but she didn't have any rope. Instead, he used wire from her paintings and had just talked to her for hours until Gabriel had come home. And it was just like, it was kind of weird, and he was masked and he had a knife, and it was just like, it was really, really scary. And he had asked for a cigarette at some point. And there's a point where she freezes up and she ends up asking Theo for a cigarette. And he's like, "Oh, I didn't know you smoked." And she says, yeah, I used to. And he's like, okay, well, how did you know that I smoked? And she says, I can smell it on you. And he still just has like a weird reaction to it, but they go outside and they smoke out in the courtyard. And he like very openly acknowledges that this is a problem. Like a therapist and a patient smoking together, how it felt like there's no rules against it, sure, but it feels like a transgression is the word that he uses. It feels like I'm breaking the rules. And I know everybody's looking at us all weird because all of the staff, when we smoke, we like smoke, off of the fire escapes or like out away from the courtyard. But here I am smoking with this woman, lighting a cigarette for her and walking around with her. Like this is like kind of weird. But he doesn't stop. Like he just keeps going. Like even after acknowledging all of this stuff, right? So they walk, they talk a little bit, and she goes back to telling him about the break-in, about the intruder, and about all this stuff. And so she says how he had asked for a drink, so she gave him a beer, and he was just talking. Like he was talking so much, but she can't remember what exactly he was saying to her. She just knows that she was planning on grabbing Gabriel's gun, but the gun was not in the usual spot, like it had been moved. And then the intruder had confronted her about it, saying that it was gone, that it wasn't there. He had taken care of it and like, oh, what a shame you would try to get it. And then ties her up. And she's saying that like, in that moment, I was sure that he was going to kill me, but he didn't. And I wish he had. And the chapter ends. And like, what a terrible, crazy sentiment to end a chapter on, right? So she continues on though. She's tied to this chair. Hours pass. Gabriel calls at some point, and the intruder tells her to act cool and to answer it. She does. He says he's going to be even later. Okay. They continue, and she's just sitting there listening to this man just ramble on. Doesn't remember what he says, but she's just listening to him and a fly that is like stuck in the blinds, between the blinds and the window of her house, just like bouncing off of the two of them. And it's like driving her crazy. And she's just like observing all of this or listening to all of this and just like going crazy slowly. And then the sounds of a car appear. The intruder looks out the window. Gabriel's home. So he tells Alicia to be quiet, that if she says a word, if she makes a noise, that he's going to kill Gabriel. So she stays quiet. The intruder positions her in the chair. She's strapped to it, right? Positions her to face the fireplace. He cuts the breaker so that there's no lights in the house. Gabriel comes in. He's calling for Alicia. Can't find her. Sees her in front of the fireplace. And at that moment, the gun was raised like a hammer and brought down onto Gabriel's head with a sickening thud. Once, twice, 3 times, and he lay there unconscious, bleeding. The man pulled him up and sat Gabriel on a chair. He tied him to it using wire. Gabriel stirred as he regained consciousness. The man raised the gun and aimed it at Gabriel. There was a gunshot, and another, and another. Alicia started screaming. The man kept firing. He shot Gabriel in the head 6 times. Then he tossed the gun to the floor, and he left without saying a word. So there you have it. Alicia Berenson didn't kill her husband. A faceless intruder broke into her home, and in an apparently motiveless act of malice, shot Gabriel dead before vanishing into the night. Alicia was entirely innocent. That's, if you believe her explanation. I didn't. Not a word of it. Apart from her obvious inconsistencies and inaccuracies, such as that Gabriel was not shot 6 times, but only 5, one of the bullets being fired at the ceiling, nor was Alicia discovered tied to a chair, but rather standing in the middle of the room, having slashed her wrists. Alicia made no mention to me of man's untying her, nor did she explain why she hadn't told the police this version of events from the start. No, I knew she was lying. I was annoyed that she had lied badly and pointlessly to my face. For a second, I wondered if she was testing me, seeing whether I accepted the story. If so, I was determined to give nothing. I sat there in silence. Unusually, Alicia spoke first, and she said, "I'm tired and I want to stop." He says, "Okay, there's nothing else to say." She says, "There's one more thing to say, and I'll tell you tomorrow. And she leaves the room. And yet again, I'm going to say, lock in, boys. Lock in. Okay. He goes to Lazarus and he says, hey, this is what she just told me. And I feel a lot of feelings about this. Like, I need some guidance. Like, I just, like, what am I supposed to say to this? What am I supposed to say to, like, literally anything that is happening again? And really all that Lazarus says is he doesn't believe a single word of it. Like, he doesn't think that the intruder is real, that the stalker is real, that any of that is real. And so he tells Theo to demand the truth, demand she tell you everything, challenge her, call her on it, get her to tell you what actually happened. Okay. In the next chapter, we cut back to the whole subplot thing of Theo and Kathy cheating on Theo. And so this is like after she met him at the park and hooked up and whatever. And so he decided to follow Kathy's lover home. He gets on a bunch of different trains and buses. He spends a couple, like 30 minutes in a warehouse. There's like a bunch of other stuff that goes on. Follows him. He's in a neighborhood. He picks up a rock. He is literally about to bash this man's skull in, and a neighbor across the street opens their door. There's a bunch of noise, a bunch of like, oh, thank you, so good to see you, oh my god, this is so great, like obvious end of a party. And this like snaps him out of the like murderous haze that he was in. Drops the rock, but he continues to follow Kathy's lover. He enters a house. In the house, he turns on the lights. There's very clearly silhouettes. He's talking to somebody. Very clearly, ultimately, it ends up being a woman, assumably his wife. And so Theo, watching all of this, I wasn't the only one being betrayed. I knew I couldn't leave it here. I had to do something, but what? Despite my best homicidal fantasies, I wasn't a murderer. I couldn't kill him. I'd have to think of something cleverer than that. And we go into chapter 17, part 4. He arrives back at the Grove after this conversation with Alicia the prior day, and he's like ready to confront her and to be like, I don't believe you, tell me the truth. But before he can, Yuri, the lead nurse guy person, confronts him and says, there's been an accident. Alicia, she took an overdose. Where is she? Yuri shook his head. She's still alive, but thank God she's in a coma. It doesn't look good. Where is she? Yuri took me through a series of locked corridors into the intensive care ward. Alicia was in a private room. She was hooked up to an ECG machine and a ventilator. Her eyes were closed. Christian was there with another doctor. He looked ashen in contrast to the emergency room doctor, who had a deep suntan. She'd obviously gotten back from a holiday, but she didn't look refreshed. She looked exhausted. How's Alicia? I asked. The doctor shook her head. Not good. We had to induce a coma. Her respiratory system failed. What did she take? An opioid of some kind. Hydrocodone, probably? Yuri nodded. There was an empty bottle of pills on the desk in her room. Who found her? I did, Yuri said. She was on the floor by the bed. She didn't seem to be breathing. I thought she was dead at first. Any ideas on how she got a hold of the pills? Yuri glanced at Christian, who shrugged. We all know there's a lot of dealing going on in the wards. Okay. So he steps away. And he runs into the like maternal woman that we mentioned very briefly before that like is also a doctor here and whatever. And he says, I blame myself. It's not your fault, Theo. I should have taken better care of her. You did your best. You helped her, which is more than anyone else did. In which case, I'm like, hold on a second. What a weird comment. Has anyone told Lazarus? Kristen shook his head. We've not been able to get a hold of him yet. Did you try his mobile? And his home phone? I've tried multiple times. Yuri frowned. But I saw Professor Lazarus this morning. He was here. He was? Yeah, I saw him early this morning. He was at the other end of the corridor and he seemed in a rush. At least I think it was him. Okay, so weird discrepancies. Alicia's in a coma. There's a doctor missing. There's some weird stuff afoot. And Theo decides to go and talk to Alicia. She's in a coma, but he's going to go and like visit her, see her, talk to her, body, I guess, her being, her essence. I don't know, I don't know the proper phrasing here, right? But he does. And as he picks up her hand and he's like rubbing the inside of her wrist because the top of her wrist has an IV, right? So he's like rubbing her palm and rubbing her wrist. And this wasn't accidental. This wasn't her injecting something. Something had been overlooked, something significant, something no one had noticed, not even Yuri when he found Alicia unconscious by the bed. An empty pill bottle was on her desk, yes, and a couple of pills were on the floor, so of course it was assumed that she had taken an overdose. But here, under my fingertip, was the inside of Alicia's wrist. On the inside of Alicia's wrist was some bruising and a little mark that told a very different story. A pinprick along the vein, a tiny hole left by a hypodermic needle, revealing the truth. Alicia didn't swallow a bottle of pills in a suicidal gesture. She was injected with a massive dose of morphine. This wasn't an overdose. This was an attempted murder. Theo decides that he needs to talk to Lazarus and Stephanie, right? The head doctor and the head, person of the Grove. Lazarus, though, is, mysteriously absent. It's kind of weird. He can't get a hold of him, but he does eventually, and now the three of them are in an office together. And Theo says, hey, I don't think that she tried to take her own life. I'm pretty sure Christian is behind all of this, and I'm pretty sure that's why Christian gave her so much medication. I think he was trying to keep her doped up, and that he had seen her previously before her time at the Grove, and this is a big secret that he has been trying to keep, and it's awfully suspicious. And I found this out through her diary entries, and Lazarus, rightfully so, he says, hey, love your ideas. I need to see said diary, though. I need to see some evidence of these accusations that you're making. So you should go and turn her room upside down and try to find this for me so that we can move forward. And in the interim, Lazarus decides that he's going to call the police and tell them everything that has happened. So police officers arrive. It's crazy. It's like a flurry of investigation, going through rooms, absolute insanity, whatever you want to call it. He gives a statement to the cops. He goes and just goes about his normal job, goes into the goldfish bowl. Like I said before, it's this room with a bunch of windows. And when he steps in there, he sees Yuri, the lead nurse, very clearly handing off drugs and exchanging money with the problematic patient that I have brought up a couple of times. He ignores it though, and he says, that's weird, and just moves on. Totally normal. Eventually, Yuri spots him and he says, hey man, what's up? What's going on? Hey, since you're here, what do you want to do about Jean-Felix? Theo says, Jean-Felix, what are you talking about? Turns out he showed up at the hospital. This is the first time that Jean-Felix has showed up at the Grove since Alicia has been admitted. It was mentioned briefly before, but very clearly, maybe he wasn't a good friend. Maybe this is evidence of Jean's, lack of dedication or his commitment or love or whatever you want to call it for Alicia. Maybe he really was only in this for her art. So what is he doing here now? This is really, really weird. So Theo goes downstairs. He tries to find Felix, but he's gone. Okay. Strange. Theo steps outside to smoke a cigarette to try to cope and understand everything that's going on. And while he's out there smoking, a car pulls up. A car containing Max and Tanya pulls up. Max gets out. Belligerent. Red-eyed, crying, angry, belligerent. What have you done with my sister-in-law? This is so crazy. She's innocent. You're such a piece of crap. I heard she tried to take her own life. Blah, 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 blah. Theo is sitting there and he's like, oh, Max does love her. He's watching Tanya's reaction, and he says, oh, there is problems in their relationship. Max does love Alicia. There's some other things going on, right? Like, he clocks all of this and ignores it and continues walking and just like leaves Max yelling and screaming at him because, like, I don't know, what are you supposed to say to that? Truly and genuinely, right? So, following chapter, part 4, chapter 21, we jump back to the whole subplot about Kathy cheating on Theo. This is after he has followed Kathy's partner home. He knows where the partner lives. He's seen the partner's wife, and he has clocked all of this. And he has begun stalking the affair partner's wife, watching her through the windows. And this particular day, he pulls on a black balaclava, which is like the mask, like a ski mask, basically. He takes a knife and he enters the home. And part 4 ends with Theo saying, "This was the first time that I came face to face with Alicia Berenson. The rest, they say, is history." Oh, hello? Okay. So, when I first read the book, I said, oh, so all of the after work statements was like a coincidence. That didn't mean after work of the work day that we had been told 6 years later. It was just after work in a generic sense. In which case I said, oh my God, this is crazy. This reveal in particular, like going into part 5, is I think why this book had me in a fucking chokehold and why I was like, oh my God, I totally understand why people give this 5 stars. There's a lot of other reasons why it gets docked stars, but this reveal was crazy. And I will totally admit that. And I will totally be like, holy shit. He killed his wife's affair partner 6 years ago, the affair partner being Alicia's husband, or maybe something happened, like, right? Like, we go into this like final parts of this book, final chapters of this book. And we're like, wait, so did he kill the husband? Did she kill what the right? You go into this and you're like, I'm genuinely having such a good time, which is like such a unique experience these days with everything, right? So we go into chapter 5 and we say, hello, right? Part 5 opens chapter 1, Alicia Berenson's diary, February 23rd. Keep in mind, she killed her husband in August of 6 years ago. Theo started working in January of whatever, 6 years ago. So we're talking like almost 6 to 7 weeks after he started. In her diary, February 23rd, Theo just left. I am alone. I'm writing this as fast as I can. I haven't got much time. I've got to get this down while I still have the strength. I thought I was crazy at first. It was easier to think I was crazy than believe it was true, but I'm not crazy. I'm not. That first time I met him in the therapy room, I wasn't sure. There was something familiar about him, but different. I recognized his eyes, not just the color, but the shape. And the smell of cigarettes and smoky aftershave, and the way he formed words and the rhythm of his speech, but not the tone of his voice. It seemed different somehow. So I wasn't sure, but the next time we met, he gave himself away. He said the same words. The exact same phrase he'd used at the house burned into my memory. I want to help you. I want to help you see clearly. And so she goes on to reveal that he is, in fact, her stalker that she had seen through the windows for like however long. And he was afraid of me, of what I might say. He was scared of the sound of my voice. That's why he came back a few minutes ago. He didn't say anything this time, no more words. He grabbed my wrist and stuck a needle in my vein. I didn't struggle. I didn't fight back. I let him do it. I deserve it. I deserve this punishment. I'm guilty, but so is he. That's why I'm writing this, so he won't get away with it. So he will be punished. I've got to be quick. I can feel it now. The stuff he injected me with is working. I'm so drowsy. I want to lie down. I want to sleep, but no, not yet. I've got to stay awake. I've got to finish the story. And this time, I'll tell the truth. That night, Theo broke into the house and tied me up. And when Gabriel came home, Theo knocked him out. At first, I thought he'd killed him, but then I saw Gabriel was breathing. Theo pulled him up and tied him to the chair, and he moved it so Gabriel and I were sitting back to back, and I couldn't see his face. "Please," I said, "please don't hurt him. I'm begging you. I'll do anything you want." Theo laughed. I'd come to hate his laugh so much. It was cold, empty, heartless. Hurt him? He shook his head. "I'm gonna kill him." He meant it. I felt such terror. I lost control of my tears. I wept and I pleaded, "I'll do anything you want. Anything. Please, please let him live. He deserves to live. He's the kindest and the best of men. I love him and I love him so much." "Tell me, Alicia. Tell me how much you love him. Tell me. Do you think he loves you?" "He loves me," I said. I heard the clock ticking in the background. There seemed to be an age before he replied. "We'll see," he said. His black eyes stared at me for a second, and I felt consumed by the darkness. I was in the presence of a creature that wasn't even human. He was evil. He walked around the chair and faced Gabriel. I turned my head as far as I could, but I couldn't see them. There was a horrible, dull thud. I flinched as I heard him strike Gabriel across the face. He hit him again and again until Gabriel started sputtering and woke up. "Hello, Gabriel. Who the are you?" "I'm a married man, so I know what it's like to love someone, and I know what it's like to be let down. Only cowards betray the people who love them." "Are you a coward, Gabriel? I was going to kill you, but Alicia pleaded for your life, so instead, I'm going to give you a choice. Either you die, or Alicia does. You decide." The way he spoke was so cool, and calm, in control. No emotion. Gabriel didn't reply for a second. He sounded out of breath, like he'd been punched. "No, yes. Alicia dies, or you die. Your choice, Gabriel. Let's find out how much you love her. Would you die for her? You have 10 seconds to decide." And he begins counting down. And ultimately, Gabriel says, a little boy's voice, a small child with the power of life and death at his fingertips, "I don't want to die," he said. And then there was silence. Everything stopped. Inside my body, every cell deflated. Wilting cells, like dead petals falling from a flower. Theo stepped away from Gabriel and started talking to me. I found it hard to focus on his words. "You see, Alicia? I knew Gabriel was a coward. My wife behind my back. He destroyed the only happiness I've ever had. I'm sorry to do this, but quite frankly, you know the truth. Now that you know the truth, you're better off dead." He raised the gun, pointed it at my head, and I shut my eyes. I heard Gabriel screaming, "Don't shoot, don't shoot, don't." A click, and then a gunshot, so loud that it blew away all other sound. There was silence for a few seconds. I thought I was dead, but I wasn't so lucky. I opened my eyes, and Theo was still there, pointing the gun at the ceiling. He smiled, his finger to his lips, telling me to keep quiet. "Alicia!" Gabriel shouted. "Alicia?" I could hear Gabriel writhing in his chair, trying to turn around to see me, to see what happened. "What did you do to her, you bastard, you fucking bastard? Oh, Jesus." Theo untied my wrists. He dropped the gun to the floor, and then he kissed me, ever so gently on the cheek. He walked out, and the front door slammed after him. Gabriel and I were alone. He was sobbing, crying, barely able to form words. He just kept calling my name, wailing, "Alicia, Alicia." How could I talk? Gabriel had sentenced me to death, and the dead don't talk. So she unties the wire from around her ankles and picks up the gun and shoots her husband after he very clearly sacrificed her. So part 5, chapter 2, we cut back to the current day. After all of this, after all of the craziness, back into the current day. And Theo is digging through Alicia's room with the other doctor, the maternal one that we talked about very, very briefly before. They're looking through the room. He truly, ultimately, behind the scenes, whatever, is looking for said diary. He doesn't know about this final diary entry that implicates him, right? He just wants to find it because there's a bunch of other stuff that he just like needs to know and put away. But he can't find it anywhere. He tells us, as the reader, I want to be clear. I never thought Alicia would shoot Gabriel. This is an important point. I never intended nor expected her to kill him. All I wanted was to awaken Alicia to the truth about her marriage as I had been awakened. I intended to show her that Gabriel didn't love her, that her life was a lie, their marriage was a sham. Only then would she have a chance, as I had, to build a new life from the rubble, a life based on truth, not lies. I had no idea about Alicia's history of instability. Had I known, I never would have pushed things so far. I had no idea she would react like that. And when the story was all over the press and Alicia was on trial for murder, I felt a deep sense of personal responsibility and the desire to expiate my guilt and prove that I was not responsible for what had happened. So I applied for the job at the Grove. I wanted to help her through the aftermath of the murder, help her understand what had happened, work through it, and be free. If you were cynical, you might say I revisited the scene of the crime, so to speak, to cover my tracks, but that's not true. Even though I had the risks of such an endeavor, the real possibility that I might get caught, that it might end in disaster, I had no choice because of who I am. I am a psychotherapist, remember? Alicia needed my help, and only I knew how to help her. I was nervous that she might know me, despite having worn a mask and disguised my voice, but Alicia didn't seem to recognize me, and I was able to play a new part in her life. Then, that night in Cambridge, I finally understood what I had unwittingly reenacted, the long-forgotten landmine on which I had trodden. Gabriel was the second man to condemn Alicia to death. Bringing up this original trauma was more than she could bear, which is why she picked up the gun and visited her long-awaited revenge not upon her father but upon her husband. As I suspected, the murder had much older, deeper origins than my actions. But when she lied to me about how Gabriel died, it was obvious Alicia had recognized me and she was testing me. I was forced to take action to silence Alicia forever. I had Christian take the blame. A poetic justice, I felt. I had no qualms about framing him. Christian had failed Alicia when she needed him the most. He deserved to be punished. Silencing Alicia wasn't so easy. Injecting her with morphine was the hardest thing I've ever done. That she didn't deserve to die, but is asleep is better. This way, I can still visit her every day and sit by her bed and hold her hand. I haven't lost her. He and the other therapist, doctor, woman, lady, finished packing up Alicia's room and they haven't found anything. I searched the room, feeling increasingly frantic. I turned the cardboard boxes upside down, scattering their contents on the floor. I rummaged through the debris, but it wasn't there. Being Alicia's diary. He can't find Alicia's diary. I tore apart her clothing but found nothing. I ripped open the art portfolio, shaking sketches to the floor, but the diary wasn't among them. Then I went through the cupboards and pulled out the drawers and checking that they were all empty, hurling them aside. It wasn't there. He can't find her diary anywhere. Right, so eventually he just has to give up because otherwise it would look weird and suspicious. So in our very, very final chapter of the book, part 5, chapter 3, he leaves the building and he runs into one of the guys that's in charge of the hospital, like the trust of the hospital or whatever. And while revealing that Dr. Lazarus has retired, that he wants nothing to do with it because ultimately he reveals Dr. Lazarus has retired because no one wants to deal with the drama and the questions and everything that will come after all of these big reveals from Alicia, right? So he's gone. But in his wake, he had said that Theo would be the most qualified. And he kind of like voluntold, signed up Theo to be the next, leader or whatever it would be of the Grove. However, the guy is here to announce that the Grove will be closing in 6 months. So it's kind of like irrelevant. However, Theo does note, I almost got away with it. I almost got everything that I wanted. Well, Almost. 1 year ago, he and Kathy had moved into a new house. Well, new old house. They had moved from London to Surrey, which means they had moved into his childhood home after his father had died, and his mother had moved into a home. She gifted the house to Theo and his wife. They move in. This is well after Kathy's affair partner died, right? Gabriel. Alicia's husband had passed away, had been unalived. So she's like a shell of who she used to be, Kathy, right? Because she misses her partner, she misses all this other stuff, and Theo's here. He's vibing, he's going along, and this particular day he comes home and he tries to talk to his wife. He's like, "Hey, I had a client at work, admitted X, Y, and Z, and it was really, really bad, and we had all these police here." And Kathy, his wife, does not give a fuck at all, right? Could not care less. Suddenly there's a knock at the door. And it is an investigator, a detective. He asks to talk to Theo, and long story short, he says, "So, Inspector, what is it that you wanted me to talk about? What is it you wanted to talk to me about?" "Well, Mr. Martin, mainly." "Jean Felix? Really? That's like Martin is Jean Felix's last name." "What about him?" "Well, he'd come to the Grove to collect Alicia's art materials, and we got to talking about one thing and another, and he's an interesting man, Mr. Martin. He's planning a retrospective of Alicia's work. He seems to think that now is a good time to reevaluate her as an artist, given all the publicity. I dare say he's right. You might want to write about her, sir. I'm sure there'll be an interest in a book or something like that." "I hadn't considered it. What exactly has Jean Felix retrospective got to do with me, though, Inspector?" "Well, Mr. Martin was particularly interested in the new painting. He didn't seem concerned that the other patient had defaced it. He said it added a special quality to it. I can't remember the exact words he used. I don't know much about art myself. Do you?" "Not really." I wondered how long it was going to take for the inspector to get to the point and why I was feeling increasingly uneasy. Anyway, Mr. Martin was admiring the picture, and he picked it up to look at it more closely, and there it was. What was? This. The inspector pulled out something from his jacket, and I recognized it at once. The diary. The kettle boiled, and a shriek filled the air. I switched it off and poured some boiling water into the mug. I stirred it and noticed my hand was trembling slightly. Oh, good. I was wondering where it was. Wedged in the back of a painting in the top left corner of the frame. It was jammed in tight. So that's where she hid it, I thought. The back painting. The back of the painting that I hated. The one place I didn't look. The inspector stroked the creased, faded black cover and smiled. Fascinating. The arrows, the confusion. I nodded. A portrait of a disturbed mind. Inspector Allen flicked through the pages to the end. He started reading it aloud. He was scared of the sound of my voice. He grabbed my wrist and stuck a needle in my vein. I felt a sudden rising panic. I didn't know those words. I hadn't read that entry. It was incriminating evidence that I had been looking for, and it was in the wrong hands. I wanted to snatch the diary from Alan and tear out those pages, but I couldn't move. I was trapped. I started stammering. I really think it's better if I spoke too nervously, and he heard the fear in my voice. I made no further attempt to stop him. Any action I took would be viewed as incriminating anyway. There was no way out, and the strangest thing is, I felt relieved. "You know I don't believe you happen to be in my neighborhood at all, Inspector." "No, you're quite right. I thought it best not to announce my intention of my visit on the doorstep, but the fact is, this puts things in rather a different light." "I'm curious to hear it." I heard myself saying, "Will you read it aloud?" "Very well." I felt strangely calm as I sat in the chair by the window. He cleared his throat and began, "Theo just left. I'm alone. I'm writing this as fast as I can." As I listened, I looked up at the white clouds drifting apart. Finally, they had opened. It had started to snow. Snowflakes were falling outside. I opened the window and reached out my hand. I caught a snowflake. I watched it disappear, vanish from my fingertip. I smiled, and I went to catch another. And the book ends. So, okay, Okay. Yeah. So we got the big reveal, right? That he was the stalker the whole time. That when he did his like the subplot about Kathy cheating on him, that was actually like 6 years ago, and he had murdered Kathy's partner, to get back at her, whatever, and it ended up actually being Gabriel. So then Alicia got arrested, and then what? Her art stayed up in this gallery for 6 entire years for him to be able to like retrace this. He like, I understand, I guess, him staying obsessed with her because he was like, oh my God, I killed her husband. Well, not even. Again, it's like he didn't expect her to actually kill her husband. So he's like, I'm curious about what pushed her there. So he got this like weird, obsession with finding her. But then I'm like, so what about Max and Jean Felix? Were these just like red herrings? Was everybody in on this like type of crazy using of her? And even Barbie, the neighbor that had called the cops after hearing the gunshots, she had indicated like a hatred for Barbie. And so then I'm like, is all of this like unreliable narrator? Because technically, the way that this is written, it almost appears that all of it was written in Theo's point of view. So was this Theo telling her story entirely through his point of view? So even her diary entries were like filtered through it? Is that why it all has the same voice? Is that why it all sounds like it was written by the same person? Because it like intentionally was, because none of these stories were true and it was just him like projecting these bad situations upon her to justify potential of doing other stuff? Was this just a bad writer? Was this all intentional? I don't know. Genuinely, I cannot tell. I cannot tell if this was like so ingeniously written as like a narcissistic, shitty, unempathetic, like cannot do anything but like wanting to get away with it person versus like a bad author. I genuinely, wholly, entirely could not tell you which type of thing that we're dealing with. And I feel like I need to read more from this author to maybe understand their voice as a whole to be able to make that judgment. But like, if this is how they write, I don't want to read that. But when I read it for the first time in 2023, I couldn't look away. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Where's Kathy? Is she still alive? We're talking in weird past, present, future, present tense. I don't know what's happening. Is she's a ghost of herself and she's unreactive to any. Well, okay, so I guess so. So she would be a ghost of herself. His wife, Kathy, would be a ghost of herself at the end. After 6 years after killing her affair partner, and then finally the cops find out about it through the diary entries and like whatever, and that's why they're there. Because Alicia wrote the implicating diary entries. She didn't write in it at all over the last 6 years? Or did we only hear the parts of it that were applicable to this particular character? I don't know. This was such a weird book. And I hated it. And like, I go back to the fact that like I kind of mentioned earlier, I understand that there's a value and maybe a purpose of like him rubbing you the wrong way and being unrelatable, right? Because he's like not a good guy. Maybe he was narcissistic. Maybe this was coming from a bad place of like relatability. And so maybe you shouldn't feel a connection to him. But it goes back to the fact that like Alicia and him in the story, when I would go from like a chapter from Theo's perspective versus reading a diary entry from Alicia, it had the exact same voice. It sounded like the same person writing. And so then we're going to like layer number 87 of complication of like, was that intentional? Is this even Alicia's real diary entry, or is this him writing this to like frame or justify other behavior, which doesn't make sense because he got implicated at the end? And so then we go back to the idea that maybe this author just isn't that great. Maybe this author just can't write a character in such a way. I don't know. I just like, I end up in this like really weird spot where I'm like, I hated it, but I loved it. But I was also like, what, WTF, which is like a good reaction. But then I was like, WTF in a bad way. So I don't know how I feel. How did you feel? Have you read this? Did you like it? Did you like anything? What's going on? How are you feeling? You got any fun plans for the weekend? I'm only half kidding. Okay. Anyway, I'm gonna call it a night. It is getting late and I have other stuff to do. So Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you. I can't wait to hear your opinions. And if you have any more spooky, ooky thriller mysteries that are good that you recommend, please comment down below or through my Google form in the description box below. Please let me know. I'm actually really enjoying this genre, and this is like something so different than what I usually do, so I'm having a good time. So yeah, anything you've got to say, I would love to hear it. And on that note, I will see you in the next one. Bye!